Good afternoon to all girls. Welcome you once again for my English class. So, today we are going to revise those what we have seen in the last classes for CA test. Unit 1 and Unit 2. First, we are going to revise Unit 1 prose. First of all, what is meant by prose? Prose is a written or a spoken language in its ordinary form without any structure. That means if there is no rules and regulation without any formation, that is called prose. The first prose is A Right to Public Amnesia, written by Santosh Desai. Santosh Desai is a columnist with several prominent publications. He writes extensively on media and everyday life. He is one of the best known social commentators in India. Santosh Desai is the managing director and CEO of a Future Brand Limited. He is leading advertising professional. Santosh Desai wrote an article in his column of the Times of India on 8th June 2014. The name of the article was The Right to Public Amnesia. It was about individual rights over life and actions. He started the article with an enthusiasm, but he could not find a suitable solution for his question. Next, on Saying Please, written by A.G. Gardiner. A.G. Gardiner is a British journalist and author. He wrote with the pen name Alpha of the Plug. His essays are graceful and humorous. He stresses the value of good manners in social life in all his essays. A.G. Gardiner discussed a legal regulation, although no one is legally mandated to be courteous. It is expected to act in a polite manner in the society. Next prose, With the Photographer, written by Stephen Leacock. Stephen Leacock was born on 30th December 1869 at Swanmore in England. He is a Canadian humorist and short story writer. He uses colloquial style to instil the importance of humor in life. Stephen Leacock is one of the most delightful writers of contemporary times. We have the theme in security and anger in this story. Leacock's experience with the photographer is picturized to the readers. His main intention of taking a photos is spoiled by the inexperienced photographer. The author becomes angry with the photographer at the end. Next, Indian Women, written by Dr. S. Radhakrishnan. Dr. Radhakrishnan was born on 5th September 1888 in Tirutani. He was an Indian philosopher and statesman. He served as the President of India from 1962 to 1987. His birthday is celebrated as Teachers' Day in India. He died on 17th April 1975 at the age of 86. In this prose, the author highlights the importance of women. They have equal right with men. Dr. Radhakrishnan has stressed upon the importance of education to women. Certain periods of our history have neglected the education of women. He has a great respect and reverence for womanhood. Male and female constitute ordinary a fundamental unity. The next unit is Unit 2 Poetry. What is meant by poetry? A poetry is a literary work in which the expression of feelings and ideas is given intensity by the use of distinctive style and rhymes. Poems collectively are as a genre of literature. First of all, Time and Love, written by William Shakespeare. Actually, it is a sonnet 64. William Shakespeare was born at Stratford on Avon. He had his education at Free Grammar School at Stratford. He was a famous poet, playwright, and actor. He had written 154 sonnets, 37 plays, and the theme of time and love and the theme of time, love, beauty, and destruction. The sonnet 64, Time and Love, is a 14 line, is one of the 154 sonnets, focuses a common theme. The poet is portrayed as a historian and philosopher. The poet dreams of time's relentless destruction of ancient glories. Everything on the earth is controlled by time. The poet stresses the fact if there is a beginning, there is an end in the minds of readers. Next poem, Saturn's Speech by John Milton. First, John Milton was born in 1608. He is the most important poet and the representative of the Puritan age. His poetry was influenced by the historical events of his time. He was very much interested in the Greek, Latin, and Italian culture. Maybe his works were divided into three periods, that is, Greek, Latin, Italian, and English. He wrote for the liberty of the press while the Puritans forbade free discussion. He breathed his fast in the year 1674. This extract is from Milton's epic poem Paradise Lost, Book 1. It is about Satan's revolt against God. He believed that God was a tyrant. It retells the story of the loss of the Garden of Eden, as narrated in the book of Genesis. After Satan breaks free from his chain, he emerges from burning lake. He attempts to lift the spirit of his fellow fallen angels by delivering his speech. Next poem, Obituary, A.K. Ramanujan. A.K. Ramanujan was an Indian poet born in Mysore on 16th March 1929. He wrote about Indian life and culture. He worked as a professor of English in various colleges and universities. He had 4 collections of poems to his credit. He produced an anthology of Indian poetry, a volume of critical essays, and numerous articles and reviews. In this poem, Obituary, the poet narrates the death of his father. The poet seems to be quite dispassionate about his father's death. He points out all the things that his father left undone. The poet has used irony and paradoxes to highlight his remarks. In short, his father's legacy was poverty and burden of the family. Next poem, The Professor, Nazim Ezekiel. Nazim Ezekiel was an Indian Jewish poet. He was born on 16th December 1924 and breathed his last on 9th January 2004. He was not only a poet but also a playwright, editor, and critic. He was awarded the Sahitya Akademi Award for his poetry collection Later Day Sam. The poem. It is a monologue. It is a satirical poem written in the form of a poem between a professor and a student. The professor is a narrator. He talks about himself, his family, and children. He speaks about his sons and daughters, his health, changing times, and changing values. The poet has used informal style to convey his thoughts in the poem. Let me see theme of the poem. This poem is written in the form of a monologue. He makes fun of himself by the way he speaks or thinks. The professor has retired from service. He is really happy that he has lived a content life. His two sons are well settled in life. His two daughters are married. He has become a grandfather of 11 children. He is healthy at the old age. He hoped to reach a century. The overall summary of obituary. The poet was not carrying a son to his father. He did not mind about his father's death. He was not interested to send the matter to newspaper. The poet remarked that his father had left the table full of papers, debts to be paid, daughters to be married, and a bedwetting grandson. He did not earn wealth or property to him. His grandson was named after him. He had left only an old house as his asset. His father lived a perfect life and his body was burnt completely. After the ceremony, his father's ashes were dissolved in the sacred river. He did not mention the death of his father in the newspaper. Someone had done it and told him that his father's name was in the obituary column in a Madras newspaper. The poet waited to see his father's obituary in the newspaper cones. The poet had the habit of reading newspaper cones for fun. The poet had a widowed mother. The appearance of his mother was completely changed after his death of his father. It is really pathetic to see that widows who do not get as much respect as mothers and wives used to get in Indian society. Saturn's speech. Theme of the poem. Saturn is surveying his new home. He is trying to become aware of the new situation after his downfall. Saturn's new world is different from the paradise. He is not happy at first with his new place and later rejects the despair and accepts the situation. He realizes that he is the new possessor of a place. His ambition is to have a new reign, whether the place may be gloomy or horrible. He is great in the self assurance of his strength. He shows all his characteristics courage, pride, power of speech, self confidence, ambitions, and so on. Next one, Time and Love. Theme of the poem Time and Love. The poem is in the form of a sonnet in 14 lines. It is divided into two sections. The first 8 lines form a section called active, and the remaining 6 lines form a section called sestive. The poet dreams of the distraction caused by the passage of time. The famous monuments and ancient glories like castles, churches, and cities will one day be confounded to decay. Time's terrible hand buries the lofty towers. The ocean swallows up the land and it leads to constant changes. The shore and front land will be the parts of the sea. The poet feels that time will come and take away his love. He weeps like a child over the time's relentless action. Outline of Indian Women Summary. In this essay, Indian Women, Dr. Radhakrishnan says that womanhood has been highly respected in Indian tradition. They have equal right to development and advancement in life as men do. In early times, education of women was encouraged, but in the later period, it was neglected. Swami Vivekananda complained that our country could not produce great women. Ramakrishna advised renunciation of women and wealth for his male devotees, but the respected womanhood. The institution of marriage was exalted in the Indian tradition. Women were free to choose their husbands. They were not the bond slave of pleasure. The Oriental woman is not very different from other women. In her innermost nature, she remains essentially feminine on account of our social and religious culture. All over the world, women are devoted and obedient. We have to adapt higher standards of education and moral instruction not only for women but also for men. A successful marriage requires a personal adjustment. Women are the missionaries of civilization and leaders is ahimsa. They will teach the art of peace to the warring world. The position of women in any society is a true index of its culture and spiritual level. With the photographer outline. With the photographer is an adapted screenplay from one of the Stephen Leacock's short stories. The story is about enthusiastic customer who encounters an annoying photographer. The whole story is about the experience of the author through the process of getting his photograph taken. Once Leacock went to a studio to take a photo of himself. The photographer asked him to wait for an hour and called him inside. The photographer asked him to sit on the stool under the beam of sunlight. The photographer rolled the machine into the middle of the room and crawled into it from behind. He looked at the author at many angles, but he was not satisfied with his face. The photographer adjusted Leacock's face. He told him strictly to follow his instructions. He asked him to open his mouth a little and then to close it. He asked him to drop the ears a little more. He further told him to roll the eyes under the lid and put his hands on his knees. And he insulted him to turn the face and little up and expanded his lines. Leacock became furious and got up from his seat. Unfortunately, the photographer clicked him at the moment he asked him to come and see the proof on Saturday. Leacock was disappointed to see his photograph on Saturday because the photograph did not resemble his face. He had retouched every part on his face. The photographer told him that he altered his mouth and eyes. He assured him that his ears could be altered by a chemical process. The author wanted his original face to be reflected on the photograph. The photographer spoiled his features on the face. Leacock became angry and left the studio with tears, telling the photographer to keep the photo with him. Next. On saying please outline. The young liftman in a city office who threw a passenger out of his lift was fined for the offense. It was a question of please. The complainant entering the lift said top. The liftman demanded top please. As the passenger refused, he hurled him out of the lift. The law does not permit us to hit back if we are the victims of bad manners. Bad manners create a chain reaction. The liftman's behavior was abnormal. Please and thank you are the small words with which we pay our social bill. It is only the vulgar mind which would wish to command. The writer tries to feature the character of a bus conductor who would consider the passenger as his natural enemies. The author confirms that the public is being hurt by the rude behavior of a conductors. A.G. Gardner differentiates the bad manners of these conductors with another one who has the fun of patience. He is considered to be the gift for the passenger. He makes his passenger to be comfortable and helps them as far as possible. The writer throws light on the law. The policeman is necessary symbol and the law is a necessary institution for a society. The law can only protect us against material attack. The polite man may lose the material advantage, but he always has the spiritual victory. The author concludes that patience can lead to victory, but not the revenge. Outline of the right to public amnesia. The author Santosh Desai says that the right to be forgotten is a clever invention. Amnesia is nothing but forgetfulness and individual. In the modern days, it has become a feature to forget all about oneself and about others too soon. These are some waxing questions in the European state regarding this right to be forgotten. They are: does one own one's existence? Do individuals have full property rights over their life and actions? Does the social imprint left behind by an individual belong to her? The internet has changed some fundamental assumptions around which the society has been ordered. The private rippled outwards into the public through the gossip and conversation. One cannot document the everyday lives of everybody. Initially, tape recorders have been used to record the voice of individuals. From this, it is understood that most people strive to be remembered. The internet changes the nature of memory, and here is the difference between the private and public. A Spanish national complains that outdated information after clearing depths affects the minds of individuals because it comes up in search results. The individual is center of his own. We are visited by versions of ourselves everywhere on the net. The technology has closely associated with the individual. The world has to remember us for our action. The question of property right is deeply difficult one. It relates the difference between the individual and the society. The author raises a question: does the social imprint left behind by the tournament belong entirely to the organizer? A society of memory creates a template for a new kind of individual. The author concludes that the right to be forgotten is not the final answer, but it is merely the doorway to be much bigger set of questions. This is the overall explanation of for about 2 units. Okay, girls, I hope you are all understand. If you have any doubts and questions regarding this explanation, you just ask in the comment section. Thank you, girls. All the best for your CA test.